Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Running Man review. Now, this version of the Running Man is directed by Edgar Wright. He's one of those few directors who has his own signature style and will leave his mark in any film he directs. You will recognize an Edgar Wright film if you've seen enough of his movies. He has done some amazing films like the Cornetto trilogy and the Last Night at Soho, Baby Driver, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. All amazing films. He has done everything. He's done sci-fi, he's done action, he has done drama, he has done dark comedy, all the genres. Now, we all have our favorite Edgar Wright films, and some of us even have his movies on our shelves. So, which is your favorite? Do let me know in the comments below. Now, the main protagonist of the film is Ben Richards, played by Glenn Powell. Ben Richards is a family man. He has a wife and a daughter, and his daughter happens to be very sick with a bad case of influenza, and he needs money for the meds. Now, he's fired from his job, and he's not able to find another one. So, he's financially strapped and in desperate need for cash. So, guess what he turns to? The Running Man show. Now, if he goes to the headquarters in order to enroll for one of these shows, he meets a sinister head of the department called Dan Killian, played by Josh Brolin. Now, Ben initially did not want to enroll into the Running Man because he knows how dangerous it is, and his wife is against it, and he promised her that he wouldn't enroll into the Running Man. However, Dan brainwashes him and convinces him to join the Running Man because he feels he has the right kind of temperament, the attitude, and the anger, and basically all these required qualities in order to excel in the Running Man. And he tricks him into signing the contract. Ben, initially hesitant, however, said that he does not want to enter the Running Man. Instead, he wants to go for the other games, the other kind of marathons, if you will, where it is less dangerous but also less money. However, Dan says that this Running Man will basically pay him $1 billion, which will basically put him in the top 1% of the society and basically set him for life. He can take his family to a better place. Now, Ben is a family man. He loves his family deeply, so he agrees, ultimately, reluctantly though. He signs the dotted line, and then the run begins. However, he's not the only running man. There are two more people with him, Tim Jarinski and Laughlin. However, these two running men, they're not his friends. They're basically acquaintances. I guess they get introduced to each other. However, their mileage is short. They're killed off pretty early in the film, and Dan is the only one left running. And boy, does he give them the run for their money. Now, when people go to see The Running Man in the theater, there will 100% be inevitable comparisons between the 1987 version of Running Man as well as this Running Man. So, my review will contain some comparisons in order to add better clarity to this film. Here we go. Now, Ben Richards in this film, I feel, is a much more fleshed out character. He has been given a more sympathetic edge by the filmmakers. He's a family man who cares deeply about his family, and they are his weak point, basically. But don't let the sympathetic nature fool you, because Ben Richards, in this movie at least, is a very angry man. He's very impulsive, quick to a fight, and will not hesitate to do anything necessary, even through the use of aggression, in order to meet his goals. He basically has nothing to lose. However, like I said, his family is the only weakness he has, and that's the only way you can even control him. This is a pretty stark contrast to the Schwarzenegger version, where yes, he was capable of fighting. He was an imposing man, but however, he was not that dangerous. And I don't feel scared of him. I mean, like literally, even though he could fight, he was not as aggressive, and he was much more calm and composed, more subdued. Now, this version of the Running Man is much more faithful to the Stephen King novel, and that's a very good thing, because the Schwarzenegger version, it just borrowed the name, the Running Man, as well as the character Ben Richards, and probably the dystopian future. That's it. It literally went in a completely different direction as opposed to Stephen King novel. But this one is much more faithful and is much more closer to the novel, and that is a very good thing, and I feel is a very good improvement. The Schwarzenegger version is basically like the World War Z situation, meaning like even in World War Z, from the Max Brooks novels, they took the name as well as the zombies, but that's it. It had nothing to do with the novel or how the novel went. The movie went in a completely different direction, a more action-adventure route, as opposed to the novel. Now, the 1987 version, it is a much more smaller scale film. We must understand that during that era, the budget for this film was quite small, because of which, if you notice, the entire Running Man contest and Ben Richards' adventures takes place within a small arena. It is like a twisted amusement park with all kinds of dangerous games and players. However, with this film, the scope is much, much higher. The budget is much higher. So the entire city is a playground. The Ben Richards and the goons can literally go through streets. They can go through buildings. They can fly planes. They can fly helicopters. They can ride cars. They can do literally anything in order to kill each other. So this gives rise to much more grander and more better fleshed out action sequences, and that is a big plus in my book. So basically, this version of the Running Man is much more open world. It's like open world video game. They're free to do anything and go anywhere. Now, when it comes to the genre these films embody, I think there's a slight difference. In this present Running Man, it is more of a dystopian thriller. It's a dystopian action film, more precisely, and it is also a psychological thriller. I mean, Dan Killian and his men, along with the show Running Man, they're not just running a deadly show, a gladiatorial game where people die for people's entertainment. They are actually manipulators. They manipulate people into joining these deadly games because exploiting their financial situations, their personal problems, and they also use deep fake to a very good extent. I mean, they literally can fake entire conversations. They can fake the expressions, what the person said, and literally sway the public to their side and basically destroy the player. I think this was much more of a psychological thriller as much as it was an action thriller. But when it comes to Schwarzenegger version, yes, there was a deep fake scene in that film as well. But however, it has a lot of sci-fi tinge to it. I mean, like the kind of costumes they use, the kind of automobiles they use, the kind of weaponry, and the arena itself where the film takes place. Has a very sci-fi look to it. I think that is very reminiscent of the 80s, and it did work for that era. Now, if you're a comedy fan and you're looking for something to laugh at in this film, if you're looking for comedy in this film, you might be disappointed because I barely laughed in the theater. I never laughed at a single sequence in this film, maybe except the grenade sequence where he throws out of the lift and the head goon, he catches it with his foot and he throws it back. I found that kind of funny. I mean, I giggled a bit, but that's about it. This is actually meant to be a serious film. I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but this was not funny in any way to me. I think the only comic relief character was Michael Cera's character, who also happens to be one of Ben's accomplices and helpers. However, he has a very short role in this film, and I did not find his character very compelling. So overall, I didn't find this film funny at all. Now, as for the action sequences in this film, they were one of the main sell points in this film. It was shown in the trailers. I think they were great. They were very thrilling, especially to see it in the IMAX screen. And the fast-paced, frenetic style of these action sequences, I think, suits Edgar's style very well, and he can pull them off well. I think it all meshed well. However, I feel the trailers did mislead me a bit. I mean, at least this is my personal feeling. In the trailers, it was edited in such a way. I think in both the official trailers 1 and 2, it was edited in such a way that it was very fast-paced. I mean, literally something explosive was happening every single minute. However, in this movie, it was more spaced apart, and there were many places in this movie where it literally slowed down. Now, I'm not sure if this was intentional or if this is how it's meant to be, but I did feel the trailers did sort of provide a misdirection in this regard. And now I have to say that the action sequences in this film are very reminiscent to Jason Statham's film Crank and Crank to High Voltage. Even in that, he plays a protagonist by the name of Chev Chelios, who literally is always on the run. He's always adrenaline rushed. He's always fighting people. He never takes a break. So this movie, at least during the action sequences, kind of really reminded me of that film. And I think that's pretty awesome. Now, Josh Brolin's character, Dan Killian, was pretty good in this film. I liked Josh Brolin's performance. However, I wish there was more involvement with this character because he's most of the time in his office, sitting in his comfy chair and just speaking to Ben Richards and threatening him, basically trying to sway him in a direction he wants. However, I wish he had more involvement. I wish he got out of his chair, probably got out in the real world, fought Ben Richards in some way. I think that would have been made for a much better action, a much better characterization, but that didn't happen. But I still liked the performance and I felt the character was all right for what he was given. Now, the script in this film, I am not very impressed. I mean, it was jumbled, it was all over the place, it wasn't planned or structured right. It did not do a particularly good job in balancing the tone of this film. And I felt if the script was better written, this coupled with the action and Glenn Powell's performance would have been really nice. It would have been really something else. Now, I can't believe I'm saying this, but one of my favorite characters in this film was the show host, played by Coleman Domingo. He was great. He was very charismatic. He really pulled off the host role pretty well, and he literally sold it for me. However, his spectrum is very limited. He has a very limited influence on Ben's actions or Ben's journey. He mainly works for Dan Killian and follows his orders until the very end. However, I wish he had more involvement in this film because the character literally grew on me. I literally loved his performance in this film. Now, Ben did not duke it out on his own. While on his journey, he has been helped a lot, especially by Bradley. Bradley happens to be an anti-activist who also lives in the poor part of the neighborhood and could easily relate to Ben and his problems. And this man is very skilled in deep fake, as well as he's very skilled in the tech. He's basically a tech guru, and he understands the Running Man show very well. And he's basically counteracting their actions. Whatever deep fake they do to sway the public into their favor, he will take it back. And in fact, he put Ben in a better place. He literally cleared his name and he literally made him the people's fan. and this really helped him in his journey until the very end. Overall, I like this movie, guys. It was a wild ride, despite its imperfections. I enjoyed this in the theater, and highly recommend you go watch it. Now, was this a perfect film? Absolutely not. I mean, some of the characters were, except Ben Richards, you don't really care much for the other characters. Once they're killed or once they're off screen, you're like, okay, let's move on. I mean, you don't feel anything. It doesn't tug on your heartstring. So the Ben Richards is the only person you actually feel something for. So the characters could have been better fleshed out, in my opinion. Now, is this film better than the 1987 version, or is it just as good as the 87 version? I would say they are having both have their own charm. They both are on an even keel because let's face it, these two movies are products of their time. The Schwarzenegger version was perfect for the 80s era. It had the 80s tropes. It had its awesome one-liners, which only Schwarzenegger could deliver with full effect. The kind of costumes, the kind of set pieces, it all was perfect for the late 80s to early 90s era. However, this film was more suited to the modern times, the kind of technology they used, the kind of dress code they used, and of course, it represented a more dystopian future rather than a sci-fi action movie. So I felt both are good and both are worth a watch. Now, but of course, if someone forced me to tell what is your favorite movie, which one do you like more, I obviously have to go with the Schwarzenegger version because the kid in me loves nostalgia. He loves that Arnold Schwarzenegger's action. So I have to choose the 1987 version because, like I said, it's nostalgic and it gives me a warm feeling whenever I watch it. So, what do you guys think? You like this movie? Do let me know in the comments below. And of course, please do subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to me as a growing YouTuber, and I love to review movies for you guys. And we can embrace cinema together. I'll see you soon.